Right.
So their visit is usually because they know that you need them in that moment. Just like when they visit you, it's probably because a father knows that his daughter needs him,
Exactly.
and a mother knows that her daughter needs her. Hello, everyone. It's me, Dr. Tosh, and I am really excited for our next friend to talk with us about Operation Heal in this series and a Black woman's mind. She is a Morganite, and so I'm excited. You're going to know exactly who she is, but I'm going to have her introduce herself. And so, Miss Brandi Proctor, welcome,
Thank you.
welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here and talking. This is different because, you're the person who's normally doing the talking and the interviewing, so it's a different space for you. So why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
Okay, so my name is Brandi Proctor. Like you said, Morganite. I said I loved it so much I did it twice. So kind of grew up at Morgan State. That's a whole other story, but I am formerly of Fox 45. I've now taken my talents up to corporate, so I kind of work in a different space, but still connected in the television industry. So yes, this is different from me. I was looking around to figure out which camera was mine.
Right.
So I am excited to be here today, a little nervous about being in this seat instead of that one, but I'm good. We're going to talk. Hopefully it helps.
Absolutely. It will. We're going to talk, there's several, I think, conversations for you, right, that, involve grief. But really involve for you something that many of us dread talking about, right? Which is living without either parent.
Yes.
Right? And so let's start there. How are you doing?
Sometimes I think I'm numb. I think it is, number one, it is, how did this happen to me?
Yeah.
Like, what? Seriously? And so I think that's part of it. My stepfather died when my brother was really young. He was 9. So, I mean, once my mom passed, for him, that was his reality. So I almost have had an example, I guess, of how to deal with it. So our mom passed in 2010, and then I lost my dad in 2020. So I think I had a little time to kind of figure it out. Still a shock, but I think you're right. It's the day-to-day. It's what people don't get, the moving past. And it's not just the weddings and the birthday parties. It is the day-to-day. I need to talk to my mother. I need to ask my father this legal question that I know he would spit off the top of his head. I think that's the thing that I think people don't get is the day-to-day losses of not being able to share the pictures of taking my son to the beach, of my children not knowing my parents. I mean, I had a conversation with my son because now he's into, every cartoon has a grandma shark, baby shark, grandma pig. They're all, so he asked me about his G-Pops. And my son was 3 when my dad passed. And he said, "Where is G-Pops?" And I was like, "Remember I told you," and he just started crying. He said, "He died?" And it's like, gosh, so to see him, to have to kind of relive that. But overall, I think I'm good. I don't know, I might need to come sit on your couch again. I avoid really talking about it. But.
Absolutely. And this is something that I think for a lot of Black women, we often avoid. And I'm going to add in an additional identity for you. And so there's this identity, and then there's also, I have really been able to be a person who is usually talking to someone who might not have it together, right? And I'm the person who can pivot in stress.
Yes.
And so the challenge with grief, though, is it doesn't always allow you to pivot. It stares you right in the face. And so have you had moments where you've just kind of had to face that, just face loss and grief, and in this moment, I don't have it all together?
Yes. And I do think that is one of the things. I sought grief counseling very early. I mean, first week, I was like, hey, I'm going to be in a psych ward if I don't talk to somebody. So I did both. I did group counseling and individual counseling. and so I think that's really helped me to recognize when I am in a moment of frustration, when I'm in a moment of losing my patience or being just annoyed with the people around me. And I might really be annoyed because my girlfriend was telling me about something that her mom did. And I'm like, "Bah, get off my phone."
Right.
You know, so
Yep.
I'm recognizing that, yes. So I always look for a safe space, especially in the beginning. So we had a green room at work. That was my safe space where I would go and cry and pray and whatever so that I could get away when I would feel like the walls were closing in on me. So it's that has lessened, but I still recognize it. And so, yes, I would say I have those moments all the time because I can't, with my mother's absence is so present for me in a daily, it's a daily thing.
Yeah. Especially because there are things that I do believe are just inherently passed down that you become aware that won't get passed down.
Yes.
Then there becomes a fear of, so did it stop with my mom?
Yes.
Right? And, you mentioned something, with your son kind of asking about his grandfather, right? And that happens, and it'll happen with grandmothers. It's just kids, kids in general will say, this person's grandmother came, what about mine? Or you mentioned a part about being annoyed when someone is talking about their mom. And I can connect. I remember when I lost my father, I would get angry when people would mention their dads. Like, what do you mean? Your dad is alive. You have the nerve for your dad to be alive?
Right.
And it really caused anger. And I wasn't angry at my friends. I didn't want my friends to lose their dad.
Of course.
But I felt like, of all the people you could have taken in this world, you took someone who meant so much to me, right? And I'm really glad that you mentioned that space of being annoyed. That is a major part of grief because you do get upset. You do get angry. Mother's Day and Father's Day aren't always days of pain. Sometimes they are days of anger.
Yes.
Because you're seeing people praise their loved ones and you're not upset that their loved ones are here. You're upset that yours is not.
Right. And so those days I avoid social media, period. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see all the generations and your great grandmas and your great aunties and your I don't want to see it. And then people are like, "Oh, we're so blessed." And I'm like, "So what are you saying I am?"
Right.
So was I not blessed? So was my mother so I think I was blessed with the best, you know? So I think, yes, those days are rough. So I avoid them. And I hate group texts. I would hate people sending me, don't send me a generic Happy Mother's Day. It's not happy for me.
Right.
I mean, do you know how many companies I blocked, unsubscribed from because they sent me stuff? I mean, you got to avoid TV. You have to put on a movie channel.
Yes.
No regular commercials. So I think, but it's been some time for me that now I just know what to do. Honestly, this year was probably the first one that I was like, okay. Now, I still don't want to go to brunch and see all the generations. I don't want to do that.
Right.
But my husband took me out bar hopping. So in the afternoon. So that's what we did. We just kind of went out for a day of.
Absolutely.
You can bribe me with tequila. That makes any day better. So
I would prefer a little club soda if you got it. I get it because you get to create your own norms for healing.
Yes.
People tend to think that it has to look the exact same way. It doesn't. If bar hopping is what is working and you're with someone who loves you enough to help you heal in the way that works for you, then that's what we're going to do.
Right.
And we're going to bar hop until we choose to come home. And that's okay, right? Because it sounds like you're creating that. You're creating, these are the norms that work for me.
Yes.
I am limiting my social media. And I'm really glad you said that because I think that is a part of healing for some people. Some people will get so focused on social media and scouring through, especially when they're very early on in their grief, that it consumes them.
Yes.
Because you made a good point. When you see we're so blessed, there's an implication that says, so was I not blessed if I lost mine? And people oftentimes spend a lot of time on social media and can become very bitter and very jaded because something like Mother's Day, Father's Day, you're just seeing photo after photo after photo. And I'm that way too. Sometimes I'm not on social media as much during Father's Day, and I'm okay with it. I'm not even telling myself don't pull it up. I'm okay with it. I can send a generic Happy Father's Day that's posted. I'm going to reshare somebody saying it and that's it for me. Because if someone's looking for that from me, you got it. But I understand that you learn how to create that space. Now, tell me, because throughout this, I really want people to honor their loved ones.
Yes.
Paint a picture for me of your parents.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, my mother was the most fabulous, all right? So you talk about, she didn't have an off day. I always say, I look at myself on Tuesdays and say, girl, you are a mess.
Right,
She didn't have an off day. She was meticulous. So the most fabulous, the bling queen, just fabulosity from head to toe. Super sweet, I always said she was a Black Panther because you would never think that this little lady with the rhinestone glasses was going to come in and talk to you about civil rights.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
So,
I know what you mean.
So there was that. She was an educator in Baltimore City Public Schools for forever. She was really, really compassionate. She used to bring students home. She would do all kinds of things. You talk about squeegee boys now. My mother loved the squeegee boys. So there was that. My father was very different, different than she was. He was, and she was, AKA, you're not going to find a picture of her without her pinky up, okay? She was charter member. She would make me say that.
That's right.
She loved leopard, which is why that's part of my ode to her.
Absolutely.
My dad was Super Kappa, also an educator at Morgan State, so on a different level, right? Because she was in elementary school, she was nurturing, she was different. He was a little more stern, a little more sarcastic. And so I think I got different things from both of them.
Right.
And so I think my mother would say I got the best parts of both of them because she would say sometimes she was a little too easygoing, and when I flip, my girlfriend's like, uh-oh, there's Bill. There he is.
Right.
So they both shaped me in very different ways. But.
Right. And do you feel like you see them in your children?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Even I see them staring up and smiling at nothing, and that's always that. I feel like those are the guardian angels.
Absolutely.
For sure. But yes, there are certain. Even certain words, certain things that like my mother would say that my son said, "Oh shucks," and I'm like,
where'd you get that from? Yeah.
Yes, there are things that happen that there is no doubt in my mind that the other side exists and is present and guides us. And that is a bit of comfort. It's certainly
absolutely
not a replacement, but I really feel very connected.
Yeah.
And I always did. From the moment that my mother closed her eyes.
Yeah.
I physically felt a transfer of something from her to me, and that is, she's there, she's here. I feel it. So
absolutely, because one of the things you talked about was there is this fear that we don't have the opportunity to pass things down, right, from generation to generation. But I am a believer in that sometimes those things are just spiritually transmitted.
Yes.
Right? So when you hear your one of your kids say something that makes no sense in why they're saying it, right? That's the connection.
Right.
And so I hope that for you, you're able to get that peace when they're saying something or looking up or doing something that
right,
they're here.
I hope so. As they get older, that's the tough part for me to think that they just won't have that love that I experienced from them. And so that makes me sad. My father wanted a boy so bad, and I was his only child. So I just, when he was going through some medical stuff, the day that I found out I was having a boy, And so, I remember going back into the room, and he had Parkinson's, so they hadn't given him like the best news. And I went back in the room and told them, and I said, well, I guess you got to live, because he said, I already know it's a girl. I was like, it's a boy.
Yeah.
He's like, what? And he's like sat up and he was like, never mind. I don't want to go back to the hospital. You can send me home.
I got it. I need to
I
get
got a
ready for
boy.
my grandson.
Right. So
Absolutely.
he was so excited about there being a boy and baseball and all of those things. So that's sad for me, but I do hope that I can carry on some of the tradition. But I feel like there's boundaries there, right? Like I don't want to project. I don't want my children to feel like, the movie Ghost.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I'm
it's hard.
Right.
So I say this, they're going to tell you when their grandparents visit them.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And so, the role really of parents is to normalize that, right? Because from a spiritual level, we know that your grandparents would never hurt you.
Right.
So their visit is usually because they know that you need them in that moment. Just like when they visit you, it's probably because a father knows that his daughter needs him.
Exactly.
And a mother knows that her daughter needs her. And so the visit is never one of anxiety, it's of comfort.
Right.
And that's what it's designed. And I don't know for you, but I know when I've been at some of my lowest times, I've needed that, just a hug.
Yes.
Right? That if I could give everything up, you could have it all for that. And so then you get that visit that gives you that hug.
Yes.
That kind of gives you what you need to continue.
And when I say there are people who are placed in my space, that it is not a coincidence.
Right.
Even I was making a big decision about the job, and I was really like, I've had to make some tough decisions in my life, but this one's hard.
Yeah.
And, I said, I need to talk to my mother. And the next morning, I called one of her best friends, and she said, Brandi, she said, oh my gosh, I thought of you all night.
Wow.
She said, but I thought it was too early. It's like 8 o'clock in the morning. She said, I thought it was too early to call you. I've been thinking of you. I couldn't sleep for thinking of you. And I'm like, no. She knew that I needed your opinion. And then when I left, left, dropped the kids off, whatever, I called my stepmother, and she said, Bran, oh my goodness, I was going to call you. I've been thinking. I'm like, oh my God. No, she knows. Like, I need your opinion.
Absolutely.
So yes, I think there are things that are not coincidences, and I know that. I'll tell you a quick story. When my mom first passed, it was like a month before my birthday, and so she always bought things, always trinkets. Whatever. She'd always say that she celebrated my birthday more than hers because she said, I was there,
Right.
So my birthday was coming, and I was like dreading it, because how was I going to do this without her? And like, is it going to be my first year without her, without anything, without a gift? Like it was really, so I said I was going to order myself something online, and I was going to open it when it came. In the meantime, I had been looking for a gold watch, right? Could not find a gold watch that I wanted. Wound up finding a turquoise watch that reminded me of her, because that was like her favorite color, and it had bling on it. So I laughed, and I left the store like, we did all that, and I still need a gold watch. So I ordered some jeans off of like whatever, some Rue La La, right? So ordered the jeans. My brother called me and was like, hey, a box came for you, 2 boxes. So I said, I don't know what's in the second box. So he's like, it looks like perfume. So I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe they sent a free gift, whatever. I waited till my birthday to open it. So my birthday, opened the jeans, great. I opened the box, and it says Roberto Cavalli. So I'm like, all right, maybe they sent me perfume.
Right.
It was a gold watch.
Woo!
That they sent me by accident.
And no one really sends Roberto Cavalli by accident. Let's be clear.
I never saw, I didn't know this, I didn't.
Right.
It just was attached to my order.
To your order. Yeah. But it's bling. And
it was a gold watch.
A gold watch. And it's classy. And it's never going to go out of style. right?
And I
'Cause it's
just,
vertical Bali, right?
I was like,
Look at that.
thank you. So I think from the beginning, I felt
Her. Yes.
that those are not coincidental. And I'm not
No.
crazy. I'm not like a crazy person.
No, I really do. You know, I think that I'd say this to people all the time. So clinically, there's always a distinction between that absolutely visits and confirmations in the spiritual realm are real. And all of that is your mom, right? Even the opinions, even when you talk to your stepmom, you talk to one of your mom's best friends, it's not just opinions from a woman. It is opinions from women who she has sent to you.
Yes.
So that's important.
Yes. We would say WWSD. What would Sheila do?
Right.
So,
absolutely. Now, there's another part of your journey that I think is certainly contributing to your healing,
Okay.
which is some action, right? And this is something that has really plagued communities for the past 2 years. We know that COVID has ravaged and destroyed so many communities. And your father, you know, passed away in 2020, and not due to COVID, but certainly due to not having enough care.
Yes.
In times of COVID.
Yes.
So, you know, I'm specifically asking you to talk about that because I'm thinking about the people who are going to watch this who really don't know how to do this part, who are saying, you know, you and I both know that Black women often are overlooked in medical treatment, not just as the patient, but as the advocate.
Yes.
Right? As the family member who is calling and asking. And sometimes, and we hate to do this, sometimes you have to remind the person of who you are in order to get the care, right? And that's frustrating. And so I'm thinking about the person who's going to watch this who doesn't necessarily know how to start. So talk to me a little bit about what happened with your father and the journey you're on now.
So yes, I always say he didn't die from COVID, but COVID contributed to his death.
Absolutely.
So, you know, COVID came, shut down everything immediately. We were actually in the hospital, and that night that they released him, he lived in assisted living. They said no more visits. This is it. So that was in March, and we didn't. They used to let me come bring him food, but we had to wave from the door. So it wasn't until July that we even got to see him again, and that's because he had fallen. He was in the hospital. So the decline for him from not being able to come out of his room, they stopped letting them gather in the dining hall. He couldn't play cards with his friends. He couldn't do any of those things. They stopped the weekly outings, everything. So he had a decline just being isolated. I mean, it's like they're in jail.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they have TV, but it's just them.
Right.
So I think that's hard for somebody mid-70s, Parkinson's. So anyway, so he declined, certainly physically, and maybe some mentally being in that space. So went to the hospital. Long story short, they said he needed rehab. His doctor begged me not to do it because of COVID. We sent him back to his assisted living. He fell again. This time the hospital says, listen, he really needs it. They assured me that the facility, my concern was COVID. Right? It's 2020.
Right.
So I asked about COVID, and I was told none. No, 0 cases is what she said. None. 0. Well, she didn't tell me there were 0 because half the residents of this facility had already died from COVID.
Right.
So fine, he gets to this place. There's all kinds of issues with wrong medication and what I feel like is total neglect. He fell trying to reach a remote that was out of his space. He called the desk for a considerable amount of time. They know that the family members can't come in. We're all limited. I'm calling the desk too.
You're calling, but that's all you can do.
Right.
Right.
So he fell, and long story short, he broke his hip. It wasn't detected for some time, and by the time we did get treatment, it turned into a lot of operations, and his body just couldn't take it, and he wound up having sepsis. But it went from going to rehab and then a different rehab, because now I'm absolutely
you need
not.
to leave here. Right.
And the hospital's telling me, well, technically he was already there. And I'm like, well, technically, tell me who I need to call at the state.
Absolutely.
Because
right. Yeah, there's neglect that has occurred here.
We're not doing this.
Yeah.
So we find him a new space, but when they go into the new space, there's 2 more weeks of quarantine.
Right.
Because of COVID.
Because of COVID.
On the day that quarantine was supposed to be up and we were supposed to come see him, they called and said, he's declined, we're sending him to the hospital. And in that hospital visit, I still couldn't go in because he was in the emergency room, couldn't be admitted.
Right.
It was the next day, and at that point, they're like, well, we're going to try this and try that. And then 24 hours later, they said, it's nothing else we can do. So it was crazy to go from going to rehab. Wait 2 weeks, to
he's declined,
go to hospice.
Because the sepsis at this point in time has taken over.
So, and physically, he looked very different than even the person I had seen 2 weeks earlier. And so the hospice process was about a week. And even that, when you talked about your father being who you need, right? I was very afraid of who I was going to be on the other side.
Absolutely.
Because again, I am his only child. He had a son, a student who he's very, very close to. But I'm his only child, so it all was on me, right? So I was there and staying there as much as they would let me because of COVID. Still the same kind of hospice rules of sleeping there. You couldn't do that, hospital visiting hours only. But anyway, I had to have a surgery. And a lot of people don't know this because I don't share this because I never knew how people would see me. So I had a mastectomy in 2020 in August, and I had to have the second round of that done while he's going through this process.
While your father is in this process, too.
Yes. Wow. So I had expanders in. We were waiting for my next step, which we knew was set for this date, October the 13th. So we go through, and I had told the staff, like, I'm just going to put off the surgery, and they said, don't, because that surgery is simple. You can't come in until visiting hours anyway, from 12 to 8.
Right.
He's fine. So you go get your surgery at 7:30, you leave at 10, we'll have the recliner set up for you. You can recover with him. Don't put it off. So I went to get the surgery, and we'd spoken, and they said he was good. I was there the night before. They said he was good. I called that morning, and I said, where am I going? Wait, let me go back, sorry. So I called my grief counselor, and I said, I'm really concerned about who I'm going to be on the other side of this, right? Because I was there with my grandmother, my father's mother, when she passed. I was there with my mother. And while it's beautiful, and I was...
Yeah, it's heavy.
It's traumatic, too.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that there's some PTSD because I can be minding my business at work or at the state fair or wherever, and I will have glimpses of things that happen, not just the final moments, but other things that happen, traumatic instances during that week. So anyway, I was telling him, I can't be crazy. Like, I have a little boy. I need you to help me figure out how to not be crazy. So my mental health was scary for me, but I knew I wanted to be there. I did not want my father to be alone because I knew the transition process was scary for him. And he did not want to die. He was not like,
I'm ready.
Lived a good
he
look.
Wasn't in that space.
He was not.
Yeah.
He was not. So, okay, fine. So I talked to the nurse the night before, and I said, when she's convincing me to go, she said, it's really important for you to go. She said, Brandi, you've been here. He knows that you can get here. We placed him in that hospice because it was close to my house. Right. So she said, if he chooses to go during that 2-hour period that you can physically not be here, then that will be what he has chosen. So that night when I left, they said he's stable. He has a few more days. That morning at 6-something, I called and said, hey, where am I going? Am I coming to you?
Right.
And they said, no, go get your surgery.
This is literally while you are about to get surgery.
Yes, on my way to surgery. I'm supposed to be there at 7:30. At 6:50, where am I going?
Because this can change at any moment. You can go to another place instead.
And so they said, nope, we got your recliner. We'll get your heated blankets. We'll see you at 10. Yeah. So I go to the surgery, tell them what's going on, and I laid down to close my eyes. And when I woke up at 9:30, my husband came to pick me up, and he would not look at me.
Right. You knew.
but it was raining, and I was like, he's just rushing. He's trying to get
Focused.
But it was odd. I would never forget. He wouldn't look. So I got in the car, and he said, did your phone ring? Did you get a call? And I said, no, did you? And he said, yeah, he passed. What?
Right. Wow.
What? So he passed. So the nurse told me that she went in and told him, your daughter's in surgery now. She said, so if you want to go, she can't get here. And she said she came back 5 minutes later and he was gone. So as much as I know he did not want to do that alone, I still feel like his protection for me
in that moment
kicked in. And I just feel like we transitioned because it was 9:30 on the dot that they say that's when they marked him, and it was 9:30 on the dot when they woke me from when I woke up from that space, you know, when I looked at the clock. So I mean, it's crazy, but yes, I think they protect us.
Absolutely.
And I think that's still there.
Yeah.
So
because remember that was one of your fears, right?
Yes.
And there's a theme that has arisen from this sofa today. And I say to you, when you watch this series, it's going to make sense. Two women who sat before you were talking about feeling really anxious about what grief would look like for them, their journey, right? And they hadn't really been able to tell people that because they're really fresh in their journey. And then you're saying, I'd experienced this before.
yes.
I'd seen it. And I tell people, yes, we say it's a good death and you want your family around you, but until you see someone close their eyes, and like you said, your body remembers every night that you didn't sleep. It remembers every time you got up because you thought you heard something. Your body holds on to that, right? And that is trauma. And you're saying, hey, I don't know how I'm going to be on the other side of this. And so in that moment, I think that your dad knew she can't do this again.
Right.
And you've done everything. You've sat, right? You fought. But she can't do that again. Because no matter how in control we are, right? And as Black women, that is one of our things. No matter how in control we are, grief is something that we cannot control for.
For sure.
And you were most likely very much at a point where this was going to be very dark for you. And so if you think about it in that moment, Dad, even in his transition, was being dad to you, to his daughter.
Absolutely.
And you said something that you don't share that a lot, and I really appreciate you sharing it, because you worry about like what the judgment will be, right? You know, well, I wouldn't have go. Everyone can tell you what they would do until they're sitting in that seat. That's the one thing that one of the things I've learned about grief and healing is you can always tell me how you would do it until you have to do it. And when you have to do it, going home to take a shower won't make sense to you until you're sitting in that seat. Going to get a milkshake won't make sense to you until you're sitting in that seat. Arguably, your father, right, this professor for years, right, would have been very upset with you had you canceled that surgery.
Yes.
Because of what it meant to you and why you needed to do it.
Yes.
And so he would have been very upset with you had you not.
Yes.
And so I think sometimes things happen just to protect us, right? Because you were prepared to have surgery. This not even you did it.
Yes.
To have surgery and then go sit.
Yes.
Until 8 p.m.
Yes.
After surgery.
Yep.
And then get up the next day and do it again. And if the government would have said, you can now stay overnight at hospice, you would have stayed overnight.
Yes. Yep.
We know that. He knew that, right?
Yeah.
And because that's what you do. And perhaps he knew something could happen if she does this.
Right.
Because one of the things that we know we always do, you mentioned this a little bit earlier as Black women, is that we look after ourselves last.
Absolutely.
And so you were going to make yourself last again after a surgery, though, Brandi. Like, let's be clear.
Like that, right?
You had a surgery, okay? And I get it, but let me be clear. I get what you would have done, and I was listening to it like I would have done the exact same thing. So I totally understand what you're saying. But you were going to do that and sit, and continue to sit.
Yes.
For no matter how long.
Yeah.
And I think your dad said, "Let me make this decision for her."
Right. And that's great. You know, my grandfather, I watched my mother through her chemo take care of her father. My grandfather was 98 when he passed. He lived with us, and she would get up every day and cook for him morning, noon, and night, and make sure he had his brandy at dinner. And she would make him go outside and smoke because she would say, "Brandy's allergic." But I mean, I watched that dedication, the dedication that she had to him, to her mom, before she passed. And my mother randomly had to go to the hospital one night, and we were trying to protect my grandfather and not tell him.
Yeah.
We didn't, and so I didn't go in that night because I didn't want to come in without her and him ask me where she was. So I went to my boyfriend's house. He's my husband now. And I stayed there. I left at 3 a.m. and was getting back up. And when I got up, the nurse was coming to the house to deal with my grandfather. And my brother called me and said, he passed. And so I think in that, I think God knew. I think
Absolutely.
He knew that she could not have dealt
Yes. Absolutely.
with that.
Yeah.
And now that was hard for me to go back into that hospital and look her in her face and tell her that her dad had passed, right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, so I think I see this protection and us saying that it happens how it's supposed to happen for you and for them, but for you.
Absolutely.
So,
you know, I say this to you. I really, really thank you for sharing this part of your journey. You know, you said when we were talking beforehand that talking about your mom was going to be hard.
yes.
And I don't know if you realized that you talked about your mom.
Thank you.
And
Yes.
did it.
Thank you.
And so that's testament to you and your healing and throughout this journey. You know, grief, healing, ebbs and flows. And so that's testament that you've been able to do that. And I really hope that someone is able to watch this, and when they've thought maybe I shouldn't speak up for my loved one or who's going to care if I speak up, I hope that they watch it and get why it's really important.
Oh, yes.
And understand the effects that this has had, and that part's not over, you know. And so I hope that people really are able to do that. And so for you, I say, I think you did a great job on the other side of this.
Thank you.
Right? On sitting and talking, and both parents are pleased.
Thank you.
And so I know that I feel from you like that's something that motivates you quite a bit.
Yes.
Right? They're pleased.
Thank you.
And you're going to know that they're pleased.
Thank you.
And I thank you for doing this. And I hope that we check back in a couple months and see how everything is going.
Oh, yeah.
All
I'm
right.
here.
Absolutely. I'm excited. And they know you're here. Okay. So I can't wait to hear the next things coming from you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for having me and letting me sit on your couch.
Listen, you see we're on the sofa. Thank you so much for being on the couch.
you.
All right. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining for this Operation Heal series of Black Women's Mind. I hope this series has resonated with you the same way it's resonated with me. Don't forget, you can look at all of our Operation Heal series episodes at www.wileyfh.com/operation-heal, or like, follow, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/WileyFuneralHomes. I look forward to seeing you soon, and happy healing.